There is one and only one thing that actually physically exists. That thing is the ether or space.
The Bodega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Bodega and sharing one of yours. In the late 1930s, a young Albert Einstein found himself increasingly troubled by the fragmented state of physics. Quantum mechanics and general relativity, through immensely successful, seemed like rival siblings, incapable of coexisting peacefully. During a conversation with a close colleague, Einstein reportedly mused that nature, in her elegance, could not allow such disunity. This idea fueled his relentless pursuit of the united field theory, a framework that would unify the forces of nature into a single, cohesive explanation. Though he never completed his work, Einstein's quest inspired countless others to pick up where he left off. Today, that dream lives on in the work of individuals who dare to think beyond the boundaries of conventional science, exploring new dimensions of reality and questioning the nature of existence itself. Good evening, curious minds, and welcome to another journey into the unexplained. I'm Rai, the Bodega, your guide through the labyrinth of mysteries and discoveries that challenge the limits of what we know. As we wander tonight, our lantern lights the path set forth by Einstein's unfinished quest. A quest to unify the very forces of the cosmos. Joining me is someone who takes up that challenge with incredible passion and ingenuity, Mark Fiorentino, a self-taught metaphysician and the author of Master of Reality. His groundbreaking theories about the united field and the ether promise not only to illuminate the fundamental workings of the universe, but also to revolutionize technology and our understanding of existence. We're going to dive into that here in just a minute or two. And before we get there, everyone, I want to say thank you again for joining us. And if you haven't, hit that like, subscribe, leave me a review. If you're listening on podcast, Spotify, it does me wonders if you're leaving a review because, hey, it boosts my podcast and it helps me to promote it without me trying to do all the legwork myself because it's a lot of work running a podcast. And also, if you also want to support the show, I have some merchandise. Let's check it out. Awesome. Okay, without further ado, let's bring Mark to the stage. Mark, welcome to Bodega's Codex of Curiosities.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm looking forward to a stimulating conversation and putting forth a lot of very important information that your viewers are definitely going to want to know.
I and myself included as well. You know, this is something that I find really fascinating, really interesting, and that's something the show does. You know, we delve into everything. We don't. I deal with. I talk to people who've had cryptid experiences. I talk to people who've been abducted by UFOs. I talk to people who've had experiences with just about anything in high strangeness, and who have also done tons of research into, you know, things that we don't normally hear on everyday news, you know, and this is one of them. So I'm definitely looking forward to this and the unified field theory, which is, I think, really important and imperative for us as a species, as humanity, moving forward. You know, I think this is evolving per se, or adjusting. I don't know. I don't know. So Mark, before we move too far, can you tell our listeners and viewers, you know, a little bit about yourself and where they can find your book and where they can find you?
Yeah, sure. I became interested in the science and unified field theory at 10 years old. Read about and learned about Albert Einstein. Continued in that interest, studying UFOs in my teenager years, and decided that the anti-gravity technology was part of the unified field theory. To understand the anti-gravity technology, you would have to know and understand gravity and the unified field theory. And that traveled with me my rest of my life. Later in life, I became an electronic technician and eventually a software engineer. Did a lot of research and development at IBM. Um, did also some work here in Florida with the Harris Government Systems and building of a killer satellite system. So I've always been involved with technology. That was what I was born to do, and I made a lot of great inventions that I received awards for in automation and software programming to diagnose problems and such. My career was really spent with analytic troubleshooting. That wound up coming in very handy to troubleshoot the unified field theory problem, which I have done and now have a complete understanding of the mechanical source or origin of gravity one. There's two types of gravity and gravity two, along with anti-gravity. So that's basic, get you up to speed to how I got here and a little bit about my background. Um, so there we are.
The, I got to say, that's quite the aspirations for a 10-year-old, to be having those types of those thoughts. You were destined for this. Then it's a for sure thing.
Well, there is a story behind that. I was
Let's hear it.
I was going to catechism, Roman Catholic, and the nuns wanted us to all find a saint born on our birthday. I remember clearly going home, no internet. This is 1964, 1965. And I asked my parents. They were not aware of any saint born on my birthday. I went over to the calendar, and Albert Einstein was born on my birthday. So I went and I studied him. And I went to the encyclopedia, and I remember sitting on the floor in the living room and reading about him. And I just was so, it just gave me chills and an interest. I said, this guy knows what he's doing. This is important. This makes sense, this unified field theory. And it intuitively locked in immediately. And then I went to read about the unified field theory in a paper put out by James Clerk Maxwell that was inside of the encyclopedia, which engaged me even more. And that's how it happened. It was just a kind of a,
Serendipitously.
yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I think a very good question to start this all off. Okay, for like some of us average Joes out there who are not metaphysicians, could you explain what is the unified field theory and how it ties together, electromagnetism and gravity and even the ether as well?
It's surprisingly simple. It could be done in one sentence. Electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. So it's important. I'm going to break that sentence down and explain it. First of all, if you really want to understand the universe, you must understand its physical existence. There is one and only one thing that actually physically exists. That thing is the ether or space. It's a real physical object that has properties. It's a quasi elastic solid, meaning quasi means if I hit it with a field, a magnetic field, it'll bend into that shape. As soon as I remove the field, it snaps back to a Euclidean flat grid. Uh, Elastic means it's just, the quasi means it snaps back. The elastic means it can be deformed, bent different ways. It can be twisted clockwise, counterclockwise. It can be stretched and can be compressed. That is the fundamental field. The other fields, the electrostatic field and the magnetic field, are both manifestations or bendings or aspects of that fundamental field. They emerge into reality as a result of their structure and how they bend that space. Particles are permanent, persistent objects. that are composed of primarily an electrostatic charge field. That field is a dipole, and that comes into play in understanding gravity and anti-gravity. So again, electromagnetism, electrostatic field, magnetic field, they go together in space as like a photon moves. There's twisting space. The photon has two types of charge, positive and negative. Physicists get this wrong and say it has no charge because they balance out and cancel. The photon never cancels itself. It exists as a positive and a negative charge. So that's a misconception that has been put forth by quantum mechanics for many years. So electromagnetism, electrostatic field, magnetic field, occur as a result from the creation, from the Big Bang, when everything was just neutrons coming out of a neutronium core of a huge object that had stored all of the charge in the form of neutrons. Getting a little aside here, I'm going to step back from that now because that's the cosmology theory. So electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. Without the ether, nothing exists. And that's what the Einstein and the people up to the year 1905 believed in. They called it the luminiferous ether, the ether, all the way back in before even Newton. They had some sort of concept of the ether because it made sense that everything that exists must be made from some primary substance. And I have confirmed that is true. And we steered wildly off course in the year 1905 due to a couple of events that happened in that time.
I would love to hear what those events are because yeah, I definitely feel like, you know, as soon as you bring up an ether now these days, a lot of people dismiss it and they're like, oh yeah, that's hogwash and whatnot, you know. But
Right.
I do believe in the ether. Exactly what I believe it to be might not be correct, but I believe that there's something else out there that, you know, kind of like that we're pulling from. But I definitely would like to hear what those events were in 1905.
Yeah. Two things. The Michelson and Morley experiment to detect the ether wind uh, was being conducted in the late 1890s to early 1905. The report came out just after Einstein's theory of special relativity came out. Who Einstein put wording in his document, if you look at it, disclaiming the need for an ether. Why did he do that? He specifically did that. There are statements in there saying, this doesn't require an ether. And that's very surprising because the Lorentz transformations, which comprise the entire theory of special relativity, were based on the model of the ether. Every last equation. And why at the last minute he would bail out on that is obvious. He knew about the results of the Michelson-Morley experiment and that it was going to fail to confirm the ether wind, which would mean fail to confirm the ether. So they misinterpreted the results of that experiment because the design of the experiment was incorrect. It should have never been expected to detect an ether wind because light travels at a constant speed relative to the ether and everything else. So it couldn't possibly generate or be detected with an ether wind. You would have to use something that has mass. They used the wrong particle, a photon. They should have used today, which I claim is being detected and ignored in particle accelerators. When you sling around that accelerator a particle made with mass, it has inertia, and and the source of the motion of that particle is external, and so it will detect an ether wind in the east and west tunnels. And I did find an article where somebody did have that problem and was trying to understand why in December and January the beam alignment goes out every year. And that's explained easily with my theory. So those two things, Einstein coming up with the idea that to order to save his theory, and he was already aware of Michelson's experiments and the null result, um, he put the wording in to not need the ether and changed the interpretation of the entire uh, theory of special relativity to say, well, the light just moves at a constant rate of speed. That's why it didn't detect the ether. So then from that point on, people gave up except for Hendrik Antoon Lorentz and Poincaré and a few others who continued their work with those equations, which most of which have been validated as working. Um, it's just the idea of things being relative to one another and not relative to the background space, the stationary, absolute motionless ether, is a catastrophic decision by modern day physics to abandon ether theory. It is detectable. You just got to use the right particle and the right technique, which nobody at this time would even attempt doing. They would get angry even at the suggestion of it,
That's
which,
yeah, that's kind of ridiculous now these days. If you try to investigate something that maybe the mainstream has, brushed off, you are outcast. But isn't that the truth about science? Is to question, like, science is not meant to be unquestionable. It should always be questionable, and due to one experiment that was done incorrectly, we're basing, the last over 100 years of everything off of that failed experiment. And it was because you had said, he used the wrong particle, he used a photon instead of using something else that had some mass in it to detect it. So it's interesting, instead of like, a lot of times it's ego, and we should just be able to step back. Let's take a look at this again. Oh, we can see where there's an issue. Let's go back and start over. And it's okay to start over, but a lot of people don't want to.
well, science has been corrupted. Almost all of the sciences have been corrupted to some degree. Physics as well. They make money on finding particles. They base their existence on finding more particles and winning Nobel prizes, and particles are at a level that's not as important as the fundamental field level. That's where all the action happens. Einstein said that the speed of light is independent of the source and the emitter and the receiving source uh, systems. That's true. But what nobody went to investigate other than Einstein in his unified field theory is what I investigated and found the solution for: the cause of particle motion. The reason why the ether wind could not be detected is its motion is completely independent of the system that's in motion, right? It doesn't matter that you're in a machine that's moving through space at any particular speed, because it's shooting a beam at a constant rate and right angles. Doesn't matter. It would always, as you measure it, always measure the speed of light, because the source of its motion comes from internal structure, the object itself. So in order to understand why light is independent speed, you have to know the cause of motion. And I have written a paper that explains it with the math. I can build a photon just using any frequency and get its energy, determine its mass, its linear mass, straight line mass that it generates, and then put it into motion. And every frequency that I use, the number turns out the answer is the speed of light. And it's all with mathematical formulations. This proves, and I have proved, the cause of particle motion is actually gravity 2 and anti-gravity within the dipole structure of those electrostatic fields. It's just that simple. And Einstein tried to do it, and it's in his work. He says it somewhere. Unified field theory based on Riemann metrics and distance parallelism, year 1930. The last two sentences. Nevertheless, I'm still far away from claiming physical validity of the equations I derived. The reason for that is I did not succeed in deriving equations of motion for particles yet. He knew it too. How did I know that he knew it? Because when I realized, I says, there's no way you can describe the universe unless you know the cause of particle motion.
Wow, that is, that is deep and very. I'm finding it really interesting. Now, you brought up you said something, gravity two. And I know when we before we got into the interview, you mentioned something about gravity and gravity two. Can you explain that? Like that is something that a lot of, I'm sure next to no one has heard before. And I'd love to hear what that is.
No, the only person that really ever mentions a new kind of gravity is Bob Lazar. And I paid attention. I says, how did this guy know this? This is actually right, according to my theory. And it drew my attention to it, which then drew my idea to do an experiment to prove it. So I started weighing magnets and found that there is a difference in when you orient the North Pole up away from the surface of the Earth and the South Pole down. They weigh slightly less than when you turn them the other way. That was a very, very small amount. I had to have a very sensitive scale and had to be very careful. I did this experiment hundreds of times. Then I said, wait a minute, I could do even better. I can make an electromagnet and I can do a stronger field, and then I can turn that effect on and off. And my theory says if I put the North Pole up to the sky and the South Pole down, it's going to weigh less than when I twist it around and point it the other way. And that's exactly what I measured. So, what is gravity 2? If you think of a magnet and you go to the internet and you look at the fields, you have the North Pole and the arrows coming out, the lines of force and going into the South Pole, that's a dipole. That is a dipole structure. You have a positive and a negative side. And I looked at that, and those lines of forces were, and their directions were determined over 150 something years ago. And when I looked at him and I saw the results of my experiment, I said, there's something wrong. The lines are going the wrong way. And according to this, the lines of force in the north or positive pole need to be going in toward the center and coming out the other side. And yet every drawing and every textbook, it's the opposite. So I says, well, now it's time to research. They must have gotten it wrong. So I went back over like 200 years, all the way back to not Benjamin Franklin, who did the experiments with the kite and everything and observed that the charge moved from one pole to the other. Well, he guessed wrong. He thought it was from the positive to the negative. The next 150 years, all the designs for current flow were based on the wrong direction. So the clockwise determination, the lines of force going in and out of the are all backwards.
So it's
Then
counterclockwise then.
I challenged physicists. You know you got this wrong, right? And they admitted it. They said, yeah, but it doesn't matter. It's just a sign change. It's a convention. We've all accepted it. And in modern books, sometimes in electronic books, they reverse it to get it right to explain electron flow. But they know they got it wrong and they don't care. Well, in my theory, it's important because the line of force, the gravity 2, occurs. Gravity occurs because there's an inward deflect, bending of space. Gravity 1, the one that we're familiar with, planetary stuff, is spherical, all going inwards. I have another paper that describes that, and it's because of the lens transformations having to do with contraction of length and increase in mass as something accelerates toward the speed of light. And all particles of neutrons and protons have three quarks. They're moving in this shape. It's a trefoil pattern. It's gonna.
I can kind of see it. I can kind of see it. I'll you know what? Send that image. Send me an image of that, and I'll put it up on
I'm gonna plug
the.
it in and turn it on.
Oh, there
Hopefully,
we go. There we go.
these things are incredibly.
This is interesting because this
Well, you have to understand.
with this reversal and this change in weight, that brings us to the possibility of anti-gravity.
Yeah,
Oh, there we
the
go.
cars move like this. Now it's just not this simple. They're moving at 99% the speed of light. In my first paper, I calculated that. I know the number. I needed that number to write the second paper. In that second paper, I use Newton's uh, differential equations to plot the quarks as spinning disks. I could have used points. It doesn't matter. It works either way. Um, this shape is not just doing that. It's spinning and rolling. It's precessing wildly at 99% the speed of light. The end result is a rapidly rotating sphere. Rapidly rotating spheres cause a contraction toward the perimeter in all directions. That is gravity 1. It's a contraction of space. And I spent a lot of time looking through Einstein to confirm that. And he does in a realization that was identical to mine. And I can quote where he says it from the God's Equation book from Amir D. Excel. Einstein followed the line of reasoning. This is how he explains gravity using contraction. Einstein followed the line of reasoning that began with the happiest thought of his life. Still at the Swiss Patent Office, he conducted one of the famous thought experiments. Einstein imagined a circle spinning in space. The center of the circle did not move, but its circumference was moving quickly in a circular direction. I just told you that. Einstein compared what happens in several reference frames, a standard tool he had used in developing the special relativity theory. Remember this sentence. He concluded using special relativity that the boundary of the disk contracted as it spun. There is a force acting on the circle at the boundary, centrifugal force, and its action was analogous to that of the gravitational force. But that same contraction that affected the outer circle left the diameter unchanged. Thus, Einstein concluded in a way that surprised even him, the ratio of the circle to the diameter was no longer pi. He deduced the presence of a gravitational force or field. The geometry of space was non-Euclidean. It was bent, curved. That's the truth. That's it. That's why acceleration is the same thing as gravity, because particles moving in this way, spinning, is accelerated motion. A lot of people don't know curved motion is accelerated motion. The link between acceleration and gravity is now complete and understood, and it's in my book. So now the pieces of the puzzle are all slowly fitting together in a sensible, explainable manner. So that's gravity 1. That's how it works mechanically. Gravity 2 exists and is unknown to modern day science other than the lab measurements I've made and what I've written in my cause of particle motion paper. I have 2 papers left to go, but I am having trouble finding the equation for electrostatic and magnetic field determination. It's a little bit complicated. I won't get into that now, but the gravity too is really, if you picture your magnet just like this, the North Pole is actually the lines of force are moving inward. Space going through the center of the magnet is moving this way. Now, according to Newton's law, if I put a force, and that's a force, because if that space moves, deformed, that's what we know as force in this universe, because that will cause motion. So if I have a dipole and its line of motion deformation, so space is coming out, rotating around and going in, it's literally moving like this a little bit, in through one pole and out through the other. That device will generate a weak gravitational attractive force on the North Pole side and an anti-gravitational field on the South Pole side, pushing it in the same direction as the pull. The cause of particle motion, the cause of UFO motion, is what I call the slip wave. This motion of space moving in that direction is subject to Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So if I pull space this way, the object goes that way. That explains the motion of all particles, and that is the simple solution to building a faster than light slip wave spatial bias drive. You create a dipole, you increase its energy. So if you wanted to do a magnetic version of a UFO, you just crank up the current until you have enough current that the field becomes noticeable. So if you have like a spaceship with the magnets maybe underneath uh, in different orientation, let's say, just you'll actually have an artificial gravitational field. You'll be within this bubble and it will be inertia free because you're stretching space. You stretch space, you drop permittivity and permeability. These are properties of a real physical object. Space. That's evidence that space is a real physical thing. It's measurable physical properties that can be modified by intense magnetic fields or intense electrostatic fields. And that's the way UFOs are basically built. They're either very high intensity electrostatic capacitors or very high intensity magnetic fields. This technology is already known by the US, and they're
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
they're going to keep it secret as long as they can.
And
Um,
so I have some questions. So if you have this magnet, okay, and you have it orientated like this, if you put a slight tilt to it, are you going to create a direction to it? Like, are you changing, possibly changing the direction that if it is connected, let's say we have them all connected to the bottom of a UFO, and you slightly put a slight angle into it, are you going to cause the UFO to
yeah,
diverge in left and right? You know,
yeah,
this
that
is crazy because this is an idea that I've had in my mind for 20, 30 years, even when I was a kid, about saying why haven't we done magnetic type of cars and we use that to drive them and it's funny that you're saying this because it's just like it's making sense. I have no idea where I came up with this idea. Maybe from the ether. I pulled it from the ether. I don't know. But
tell
it
you,
was
I can tell you in a second. That's intuitive. It's called infusion, unknowing. And more you are connected to the other side spiritually, the more you can get that kind of knowledge. It's pure, direct knowledge, not through words and literature and all that. It's above, the normal. It's the most connected, superior way of getting knowledge.
and I definitely want to get into that. But before we do, I still want to go back to this magnetic. So increasing this electrostatic static energy that is creating, like I some people that they have some people who've had experiences near UFOs say, like their hair is kind of standing up, it's disrupting any type of electronics that would explain that, like radios go off, radios are bouncing around. But then there's also the people claiming radioactivity, right? So wouldn't that could explain the power source to operate these electromagnetic fields, is they're using nuclear to operate these, and people are, having sickness, radioactive, radiation sickness.
That's exactly right. Our early designs used reactors to if you're doing a magnetic version, you need enormous amount of power,
I could
maybe
imagine.
a megawatt or more. And you can't do that unless you have some sort of reactor. Maybe I think UFOs have a reactor size that's typically the size of a basketball. It has to be compact, but I doubt that they use that technology in nuclear. They use zero point energy of some sort technology.
So
And
possibly it's our UFOs that are using these nuclear
if you've got a
reactors.
radioactive UFO, more than likely it's either an incredibly primitive star system that's just come online with anti-gravity spaceships, or it's us. And more than likely it's us because we need a lot of power. Now, nowadays, I'm sure we don't use the magnetic version. It's very technically difficult. You have to have room temperature superconducting wire. You have to have, which has probably been discovered and classified. You have to have enormously powerful power supply because you need hundreds of thousands of amps of current. That's difficult to generate and maintain. So, and safety wise, it's not safe. For us, I'm sure we use electrostatic model because all we need is high voltage, and we know how to make high voltage from very little power. We could use standard battery pack or power supply and easily
Now,
come up.
again, I still want to get back to that spiritual connection, but wouldn't this kind of explain the redirection of science is to keep the general population kind of in the dark on purpose by those in charge, so it's almost like a split, like a civilization split where it's kind of like, okay, we have all this information, we're going to keep you guys over here thinking things, but we're going to mess up with your formulas. Yeah, we're going to mess up with the flow of electrons and or the negative and positively charged of just of the I mean, not of the battery, sorry, of the magnets as well. It's just simple things, and we're just going to kind of keep, you're on the right track, but you're off a little bit, and we're going to keep you off the right track. It's kind of like a misinformation almost, just to have you under control.
Yeah, they made the choice back in the mid 1940s to keep it secret. I don't know what logic other than some sort of corruptive thinking that they want to have control of this. They know that this means a fundamental change in every. If we were to fully realize that anti-gravity exists and that aliens, ET exists, it would change the world in such dramatic ways that they might lose control of of the material world that we live in right now because the military needs war. They need an enemy
Yes,
to
I
justify their
agree.
existence. So they're always looking to increase the technology so they have the best weapons to fight the wars. And this philosophy, this need for a military is a problem for humanity in the United States because they want to keep us locked in this ignorance for as long as they can. I would imagine most other civilizations in the universe don't have this problem because they're not as corruptible as our particular species is. And we they probably, in the 19th, 20th century of their equivalent time would have discovered this. Uh, People as far back as Faraday might have discovered this. Unfortunately, he tried but failed. He did the wrong kind of experiment. He knew somehow that magnetism and electrostatic fields might affect gravity, but the experiment he tried didn't work. Um, it's crucial for our world to break free of this imprisonment so that we can evolve. It, you know, Diseases are going to be cured overnight. Um, our religion is going to become more universal. We'll have to account for all other beings, not just human beings. Our religion now is pretty much focused on the human to God relationship, where there's a much bigger thing going on. There's the human and everybody else's relationship to God
Yeah,
that
I agree.
we're basically ignoring because we still are sticking to the we're the only ones in the universe theory, thanks to the scientists and the religions, kind of locking step with that. But now, even the Catholic religion, they have scientists and they kind of are keeping aware, and they know that they can't stick to the we're the only ones in the universe thing forever, because they were wrong. They were wrong about we're the center of the universe. We were wrong about the Earth being the center of the solar system, the Earth being flat. We're still in that mode. We're still in the mode of we're the only ones in the universe, and nothing could be further from the truth.
I do agree with that. I do agree. Um, I, we have been very close-minded on certain things, and I think people are finally opening up their minds to the possibility. And and I feel though, yeah, religion is still there, but it can encompass this all. I think in right now it's okay, but it's kind of they need to grow and allow for entrance into more possibilities as well. It's kind of like it's religion and science right now are very similar, where they're very close minded, and we're not going to look further than what we've been taught, and we have to be able to look past those boundaries.
Yeah,
And
the dogma of both is
yes,
locking it in, and
yeah, I agree. And by looking past those boundaries as well, I'm going to circle back to that connection with this spiritual bank of information, this where you said that, oh yeah, you have a connection just to this intuition of just knowing. And I say I have that a lot of times. I just know things. I don't necessarily know why or how. It just seems right, and I do have like this general understanding, which I know a lot of us do, but maybe perhaps a lot of us disregard it and just push it off. would I would love for you if you could go into that a little bit.
it's part of the creation process. You have to realize the ether in all of us, everything, every particle, every being, every grain of sand on every planet, everywhere in the universe, is at the center of God's attention. There is nothing unknown. You're talking about an infinite being that created this universe from itself. We are consubstantial with the mind of God, and the ether is essentially the mind or the spirit or it's a part of us and the creation, and it connects us together. We're all connected. There is no the disconnection. In the physical form, we kind of get the illusion we're not. But the trick is understanding that, remembering that, and getting back to that. So, really, everything I equate to like a ballet in the mind of God. All the universe, all the particles spinning, all not accidental. It's determined and part of a plan. We have individual plans that we're born with. as a part of the universal plan. So everything's executing, and what makes it all really interesting is we're using our free will to determine the future and to determine the outcome. And that's it's the beauty of the whole thing. And we wouldn't have it any other way. So part of what you're doing, the intuition and what I'm doing with intuition, I've had contact with my spirit guides in my bedroom at night, um, on occasions. Um, Psychics can talk to the other side. Near death experiencers are coming back in huge numbers, confirming the existence of Jesus, God, the afterlife, spirit guides, all of that. That's the real place. That's home. This is an excursion where we acquire experience that we then take back with us and place into the book of life and becomes part of the universal existence and story that's never ending. It will never end.
I think that's so eloquently put. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. We're at this we're in this physical form right now to have these experiences and to bring back into the book of life. I like that. Like I believe that, but I've never really said that, and I think that is perfect. And you know, you said free will. Free will is immensely important. I do believe, because everyone's like, oh, there's destiny and there's fate. I do believe there is destiny and fate. It'll take us to a crossroads, but it's our choice at that point. It's like, I just met this amazing person. Do I continue talking with them, or do I walk away? Like that chance meeting happened for a reason, but now you have the free will to continue or to stay and have this chat such as we're having right now, and discovering and making headway and just having greater understanding. This is what we're here for. It's this understanding. It's just to come to an understanding.
Know this, there is no such thing as accidents. It's all a part of a synchronistic plan that reveals itself continuously based on our decisions. You don't meet people accidentally. No, everything is part of a plan. And that future is an interesting thing because it's kind of in motion a lot. And it's constantly, the timeline is constantly shifting back and forth based on everybody's decisions and everything that's going on here. So there's a battle going on that God, Jesus, the spirit guides, and everybody's helping us fight evil here in this world so that we have the best outcome for the future that we can possibly have. That's why all these people are having these near death experiences. They're getting pieces of information, they're bringing it back and sharing it. It's like an army. And it's an army fighting the evil influence that is real, exists, and is fighting to go the other direction. You could call it the deep state and what they're trying to do and everything. But this is what we're in the Earth existence. One, as is rumored, is one of the toughest planets to be born in the universe. Believe me,
Yay! Yeah,
it's tough.
yes. Yes, it really is. And I feel as it gets tougher, it's almost like, oh, you've leveled up. Now it's time for another harder, difficult challenge and see how you deal with that. And so you said something about our future being always in motion and like fluctuating and never set. And I again totally agree with that. That's something I've said numerous times. Like I believe that if there's a ability to see into the future, we that future isn't set. We have the ability, because of our free will, to change the outcome that might transpire. But what does it say about our past? Is there an ability to change things in their past, or will that totally cause like a complete breakdown of the prime timeline that we are in?
It's in my book. I talk about time. time segments. We're in a time segment. It actually has a name. I was contacted by a person who claims to be a time traveler. I don't know if he is or not, but he claims it. But he said he felt he needed to contact me because he said my description is absolutely right. He gave me the name of our particular time segment that we're on. I, the government supposedly has devices that can make people travel forward and backward in time, and I'm very much against traveling backward in time, very much against changing anything. I believe it may be possible. Yeah. Do I have direct evidence? No. But can I conceive of how it could be done? Yes. And I've described how to build a Stargate in another chapter that could be used not only for time travel, but for interdimensional travel. And working with NDE people and their experiences, they're coming back and basically saying there's an infinite amount of time lines, and there are an infinite amount of dimensions, and there are an infinite amount of universes. And when you think about it, the being that can create this, obviously, he didn't just create one star and one planet. The evidence is clear. There are hundreds of trillions of them. So if he could do that, he can make more than one universe. And there could be hundreds and billions, and it's continually making new ones every moment.
Exponentially. Yeah.
Yeah. And so difficult as this is for us to conceive of and to imagine, an eternal, infinite being can do this without even a slight tiredness or effort. And that's a consideration that I've fully come to accept, even though I'm not very comfortable. As a finite being, it's very difficult.
Very. Yeah.
Circular it becomes, and you literally can get dizzy just thinking about infinity. But
I,
it's
I
it,
agree. Yeah, it's a because we have limited capacity to actually understand it. I think that is where our limitation comes in. Perhaps
exactly.
once we move on, into and the people who have the NDE, I'm sure they get a glimpse of the possibilities, and you know only
Well,
then, yeah, it's so interesting.
NDE people become connected. As soon as you go to the other side, you have full access to the main computer, which is God. You know everything. And they've said it. I just knew it. It wasn't in words. And so I knew how everything worked. And so that's how you're outside of time and space when you're in the afterlife with God. God is outside of time and space. He could be anywhere at any time because he's literally separated from the the device that creates time. Why do we have time here? I answer this in the book. It's actually quite simple because we have space. They're interlinked. One space becomes a real thing with a dimension, a length, and a width, uh, and a depth. Then time emerges. Then you have intervals because it takes so much time to go from one spot to another. Time then becomes part of the reality. If you're in a place that's not really composed of a stuff, a real physical, ether like stuff, you're out of time, and there's no limit. You can jump back and forth across any physical universe, any time, or any universe. That's why I think there's no time on the other side, because the stuff of God is purely spiritual. It's not a physical thing. That's my best guess. I mean, it's got to be something like that. I mean, I can prove mathematically distance equals rate times time. If you don't have many scientists think space is empty, a void made of nothing. I mean, that's the primary thing they start with. But the evidence doesn't support that because it takes approximately 8.5 minutes for light to come from the sun to the earth. If there were nothing there between the two, it would take zero time for a photon to get here. And that never happens. Never. So there has to be a distance, a real physical distance that limits the speed of light. And once that happens, so you got 8.5 minutes. Now you have time and everything works as expected. It's really just that simple. If you have zero space, then speed goes to infinity. And basically, that's how the slip wave drive works, by stretching or pulling space apart, as magnetic fields and electrostatic fields do. You drop the permittivity and permeability, you drop the substance of that space within your bubble. And now that bubble can move at enormous rates of speed because there's essentially almost nothing between the front of the ship and the back. So as it's moving, it sees no inertial resistance because they're within that bubble. The space remains solid around, it goes within it at any rate of speed you want. The stronger the field, the faster you go.
So in essence, we're when we make airplanes and jets here, we have to worry about aerodynamics and shapes are very, very important. But what you're saying is it doesn't make really much of a difference if you create this bubble here. You could have like a square block, like if we're talking Star Trek, the Borg flying through space. It doesn't matter because there's no concern about resistance.
The geometries you'll see in spacecraft, interstellar ones, are very basic. Why? The mothership is almost always a long stick. That's perfect. That's the one I came up with first. I says, if I want to make a ship that could go at the speed beyond the speed of light, the entire ship has to be within the bubble, the slip wave field. If not, any part that sticks out, it's going to have inertia and it's going to cause mass increase. The Lorentz transformations become active and it's lethal. You make a black hole. So you're not going to see a starship like the Enterprise. That's just not. You would have to surround a very complex geometry. You'll see spheres, you'll see cubes, you'll see, cigar shapes, and usually nothing protruding. If it is, it's very shallow. Everything, if it's an interstellar ship, has to be within the field. The geometry has to be simple. The most efficient one to get a concentric ring technology that builds the field out is a cigar shape. Makes perfect sense that motherships are cigar shaped.
Now,
Or
I know I'm reaching here. I've heard theories that submarines were used in this kind of application.
if you were able to put the field around the submarine,
Yeah,
that submarine can go way faster than anything because like
and I'm not talking a submarine would be in the water. I'm talking like a possibility of a black ops or a black space program that is something we don't know about.
yeah, what we actually chose probably is triangular or spherical disc shape. Uh, it's tough to say because any of those will work fine. We're used to thinking of wings, so triangular shapes kind of keep popping up in the engineers' heads, but it doesn't really need to be triangular. But that's something that can easily be surrounded by the field, and it has to be. If there's any inertial leakage, it's fatal. So if you if you're not completely protected by the slip wave, um, any little sliver of weakness in the field will develop inertia when you accelerate, and it'll crush your organs and kill you instantly. as soon as you do it. So on UFOs, this doesn't happen because they're completely immersed in the field. And even the outside, the perimeter, the hull of the ship, there's probably a gap, a vacuum gap created by the field, which then is the reason why you don't hear sonic booms when these things are going 10,000 miles an hour, because there's this gap of no air at all.
Of
And
nothingness.
you got this blank area that you're moving with you that's really not affecting the air with a pressure wave. It's not creating a pressure wave. No pressure wave, no sound, no resistance. Perfect. Just what we need to make way across the Earth's surface or underwater without resistance and without inertia. These things have to be this way, or the occupants are dead. And
Yeah,
then,
yeah. I could only imagine. Just
yeah, so
yeah.
there you go.
I I think that was amazing, Mark. I've really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'd love to have you back in the future. Maybe 3-4 months or down the road, have you back and just continue this, because this is really really interesting, very fascinating. And I think you have a ton of information that needs to be shared and needs to get out. And the more people that know, the more then that we can tip the scales. It's very important, because that's with any type of information. Once you get a certain amount of people knowing, then it actually becomes known.
I,
It sounds crazy, but it's the truth.
well, no, this is, I call what we're doing, I'm putting beacons out there. People are seeing, I'm hoping some technical person, maybe even a physicist or an engineer. Engineers tend to make the big discoveries, in my opinion. Uh, will say, hey, I'm going to do that magnet experiment and confirm what he's saying, and they will if they do it right. You gotta be careful. You gotta have a scale that's 0.0001 gram sensitive, no less than that, to pick this effect up. Uh, and if you could build really strong magnets, the stronger the better, and you'll see the more pronounced, as I did it at different voltages and currents, and as I stepped it up, the effect was stronger,
Mm,
as one would expect.
yeah, exactly.
And these beacons, I'm hoping, will trigger somebody to do the experiment.
Can
Or
take it. I think we all carry the torch to a certain point, and then we pass it on. And that's important, is that knowing that we need to pass it on and allow someone else to pick it up, because sometimes, again, we run into the ego thing where no one wants to share. They want to hold on to it. And I truly don't know where I stand with Elon Musk, but that's one thing he hasn't done, is he hasn't put patents on things. And the reason is so that people can continue. They can continue the research, they can take it further. It's kind of not this ego of this is mine and no one else's. It's this is mine, can you do better?
yeah, I was hoping maybe he'd see one of the shows up, because you see, I have conflicting idea. He makes money on rockets. This replaces rockets. Um, honestly, rockets are a terrible way to put things into outer space.
They're very archaic. I have to agree, they're very an archaic way. It's kind of like, come on, we should be doing better than that.
Yeah, with the anti-gravity drive, it's pennies on the dollar. It may cost you 20, 30 million to put up a satellite with a rocket, whereas you could put it up for, 50 or $100 if you had the thing already built. You just
Yeah.
rise up into space, get to the speed, let it go. How easy is that? And you could do this all day long, not just one flight every 6 weeks or whatever,
Well,
easily.
maybe one day Elon Musk will be watching this episode. We can all we'll put that out to the ether, and we'll put that out to the universe to make this find its way to him. I do have one last question before we call it a day here. Now, I had a guest on recently discussing black holes, and do you have a theory on black holes that
Yeah,
you could just lay on us as well?
actually, there's three chapters that I talk about the
Excellent.
cosmology theory. So the black hole I have determined is really quite a simple object. You have to look at astronomy and understand what they've discovered and interpret it properly. When a new black hole is formed, typically it is thought it comes from a supernova.
Correct.
And the theory is there's an implosion with the explosion, and the implosion crushes the hydrogen and helium, whatever components are there, into the black hole, which is a singularity which has no, has infinite mass. It doesn't. If it had infinite mass, it would create a situation that would collapse the universe. So obviously, it
That makes
doesn't. But the
sense.
equations say so. They break down, and they accept that as the reality. The error is a reality. The solution is not correct. And so that's where the astronomers and physicists think black holes come from. But I say that's not at all the case. The black hole or the neutron star was already there. And where did it come from? The Big Bang. When the Big Bang happened, that device, which was huge, was hundreds upon thousands of millions light years across, contained all the matter in the universe,
Hmm.
was placed there by the Father at the creation, the first cycle. It's this cyclic universe. So when this thing, it has the total amount of mass in it of a universe, that's enough to trigger the explosion. The heat in the center of this device is trillions upon trillions of degrees. These things, the neutrons, which is all a black hole is composed of, in my theory, is a very dense neutron star. So, and neutron stars and black holes are required to build the star in the first place, because how is the hydrogen being gathered? It's not. The current theory is laughable, that they're saying that hydrogen gas in space just sort of magically knots together and then starts compressing itself, when they know that the nuclear forces, the electromagnetic nuclear forces of repulsion, are many, many orders of magnitude stronger than the gravitational attraction. There's no way that gas could just pull itself together and collapse. No way. And they know it, but they won't admit it. So I realized this and I said, there has to be a gravitational source. So there must be something very powerful, gravitationally speaking, that's spinning and pulls the hydrogen. When it enters a hydrogen cloud, it's spinning as the stars are doing. The sun is spinning. How did they get that spin? Frame dragging from the device that's in the center of the star. So if we go into the center of the sun, we're going to find there's a neutron star there. The neutron star collected the hydrogen, compressed the atmosphere to the point where fusion started. And this cannot be done without gravity. So how they haven't figured that out yet, I am astonished that they could get something so incredibly wrong, so obvious. And look at NASA's data. There's a measurement they make. It's called the um, there's a name for it. I always forget this name. There's a measurement that measures the density of the star and the rate of the gases that are spinning. As you go in, it's right at the tip of my tongue. Um, as you
I
go
wish I
in,
could help you, but that's not my. I have no idea.
I could look it up. Uh, no. Uh,
No worries. No worries. No. you can send it to me, and I'll post it onto the video here. So
think
so
I
those
have.
who are listening, you won't hear it, but those who are watching, you'll see it.
I think I have some. It's tack-a-line, something like that. I think it's tack-a-line. Um, if you look at it, it's a graph with lines that are all converging. As you go deeper into the star, the gas's motion becomes like a solid, and that it's all at the same rate of speed. And eventually, it collapses at a certain distance and becomes a straight line the rest of the way through, which implies that whatever's there is solid. There's something solid in the star that they will not accept as real. They will say, well, that's just highly compressed hydrogen that's behaving as a solid because it's highly compressed. Well, what's compressing it? What's pulling it together when its repulsive force from each other is much stronger than its gravitational field that it emits? It doesn't make sense that it continues to contract into a solid gas, and then eventually, as far as we know, there's something solid there. I mean, the evidence is there; it's just not being interpreted properly again. So it's backing up what I'm saying. What I say makes sense. So all stars either have neutron cores or black holes, and what happens is the gases and stuff, they get trapped and they're revolving. They don't fall into the black hole. They just compress into that area because of the frame dragging, which we know exists thanks to Einstein. It's a real thing. And that's why all these stars are spinning, because they acquired that spin from the device that collected the gases, which all came out in the Big Bang, along with a huge amount of neutronium plasma, which then within 15 minutes, it's a very little known thing that scientists know about, physicists know about, and now you're going to know about. If I take a neutron and I put it by itself in outer space, it will transform into an electron and a proton. And why is that important? That's hydrogen, the fuel of the universe. And so when the Big Bang happens and the plasma comes out as neutrons, storage device, it immediately converts within 15 to 20 minutes, universe wide, into the hydrogen atom, just what's needed to build stars, planets, and everything else. It's all sensible, it's all workable. It just has to be understood and realized and proven. And that's what a black hole is. It's nothing but condensed neutrons.
Really, really interesting. I know, and I have more questions now, but I'm like, oh, we are getting close to the end here, and I definitely I would love to talk about portals and these neutrons coming out, forming into a hydrogen. Like this could be a theory for explaining possibly the manifestation of UFOs into our existence almost, because there's some people explain that they've seen portals opening and then this plasma come out and then it takes shape and form into something, which what you're saying is if this neutron comes out and it forms into a hydrogen atom, that's like your building blocks, that's your fuel. Well, it could fall into that line, but that is for another day.
Right, definitely.
All right, Mark. I want to say thank you again so much for giving me your time here. And one last time before we head out, can you tell everyone where they can find you and where they can purchase your book?
Yeah. I have a website, www.super-relativity.com, super-relativity.com. You can get links to my book there on Amazon, or a mailed copy. If you live within the United States, I can mail you a signed copy. I have a blog there. I have some of my past videos there that I've uploaded as an archive on my YouTube page and so forth. And I ask permission. Sometimes people say yes, sometimes no. But I'm trying to make a place where they can come to review all of this information and hopefully to get someday piece together the evidence needed so that humanity can build a starship. So www.super-relativity.com. All the links you need, links to my papers are right there in the buttons right on the front page.
And all the links for that will be down below in my show notes, so everybody can click on that and go find Mark and buy his book. It sounds it's full of information that we need.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark, so much.
You're welcome.
All right, everyone. That was Mark, and Mark is it's amazing to talk to these experts who have this wisdom and this knowledge, and they're able to explain it nice and clearly. It reminds me of Gary Wayne, when he's talking about the Bible and the Nephilim, and we have Mark as well talking about the unified field theory and the cosmos as well. as I'm getting tongue tied here. It really goes and shows us that there's so much more out there to the world, and a lot of it is kind of being hidden from us, and it's kind of being withheld from us, and for what reasons. We could be evolving, we could be moving forward, we could have so much more, but it seems that we're stuck in these archaic ways, just being suppressed and not able to advance. So we got to get this information out there, so we hit that tipping point where it becomes so much to a point that we know that this is what we need, that we know that this is, these things are wrong. We need to replace them with what's right. These are better ideas to replace with the older ideas. And we need to throw that ego off to the side and say, yeah, this isn't right. This is better. And until we get there, we just have to keep pushing forward and keep spreading the good word. So with that, everyone, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home. I look forward to our next adventure together as we navigate the mysteries that lie ahead. Until our paths cross again, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.